In today's episode, we'll begin model editing. This will cover importing and exporting, setup, and by the end, we'll create a custom weapon mod. A few caveats though. This will not be a tutorial on Blender. I'll assume you know the controls and I'll gloss over weighting, armatures, UV maps, etc. I do recommend checking Blender tutorials before you watch this video. Monster Hunter Rise uses model files with the file extension 210-914-8288. For this video, I'll refer to these as mesh files. In order to read or write to this format, you will use a program called Noesis. This allows us to convert the mesh file into a common file type like FBX. Previously, the process would be to convert the mesh file using Noesis to FBX, then import that FBX file into Blender. We would do the reverse for exporting. Thanks to NSA Cloud and Alpha Omega, we can automate this process with the Blender RE-Mesh Wrapper plugin. Let's begin with Noesis. Here, I've downloaded Noesis and the RE-Mesh plugin. Install the plugin in your Noesis path, Plugins, Python. So let's drag the fmt remesh.py in here. Now, we can tell this is installed by opening Noesis and viewing a mesh file. Next, you would need to install the RE-Mesh Wrapper plugin and the FBX Import Plugin into Blender. Currently, I'm using Blender 3.0 for this. For the FBX Import Plugin, you'll be replacing the default import-export functions. So, in your Blender folder, go to 3.0, Scripts, and back up your add-ons folder first. I'm just making a RAR file as a backup. Now that we backed up the add-ons folder, we can replace the default import-export functions. So, drag in the io_scene_FBX into the add-ons folder. Replace the files in the destination. Okay. Now we will install the RE-Mesh Wrapper plugin. So go to Edit, Preferences, Install. Now we have to go to the path of our RE-Mesh Wrapper plugin zip. So that will be in Downloads, Install Add-on. Give it a bit, and now we can enable the RE-Mesh Noesis wrapper. Before we can use it, we have to select our noesis.exe path. Close the Preferences window. Right, so when we go to File, Import, we should now see RE-Mesh as an option. So let's select our first .mesh file. And now, as you can see, we have the mesh file imported into Blender. For our weapon, I want to replace the Kimura hammer with this frying pan model. I'll start by importing the Kimura hammer into Blender. Let's take a look at our base model. Here we have our mesh. If we set the armature settings to show names and in front, we can see the bone names. And if we change it to pose mode, we can see what vertex group controls what part of the mesh. Alright, so it seems like this bone _J001 controls the entire mesh. This is what we'll wait our mesh to later. Right, so I'll append our frying pan model. And I'll just quickly resize this. So once our weapon is lined up, we can join this frying pan model into our armature. I'll just Control P. After that, let's go back here. And then once it's parented, we have to set a new armature modifier. We should now assign weights to this model. So go to the Vertex Group tab. I'll create a new vertex group that's labeled to J001. Since this is just a weapon, we can assign a full red weight to this J001 vertex group. If there were other moving parts of this weapon, you might have to weight different parts of the mesh to different bones. Now that weights have been assigned, we can test this again. Now it's moving with the whole armature. Next, we should rename the mesh. So, follow the syntax as with the other meshes here. Let's copy it. So it'll be something like LOD_1 underscore group underscore 0 underscore sub 2 underscore ham underscore 050. So the name after the two underscores is the material name, which is defined in the MDF file, which I will discuss on the video on texturing. Alright, so before we export, we can either delete the rest of the mesh, or we can just hide them for now. So after joining the mesh to the armature, weighting it to the correct bone, and renaming it, we should now be able to export the model. So there are a few options for exporting. By default, rewrite is selected. This option allows new submeshes and materials to be added from the original mesh file. We will select selected only because we have selected only our frying pan and the armature. Bones is also necessary if we want to export new bones with our mesh, which is necessary for physics modding. For now, we have rewrite and selected only. Let's click on Export Mesh. Now our pan has successfully been added to the game. It's untextured at the moment, but we will get to that on the next episode for texturing.